the original idea. Oh, that's true. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Saint Anthony of Padua.
Pray for us.
Saint John of the Cross.
Pray for us.
Saint Teresa of Avila.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. It happens to me a lot. I try to yes. Pick Secret Santa. Yes. I'm doing the boards.
Okay.
Nina, are you playing Secret Santa with us? You are, right? I'll pick for you and Coco.
Yeah, I am.
So I try to choose supplemental books and things that are interesting and enlightening and edifying. But I don't always have like a reason. It just comes into my head. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. But when I was looking at the supplemental reading for religion, I wanted to do something that we've never done before. So I picked 2 books. Not kidding. They're on my shelf, so I can prove that it's true. Pick these books. We'll be reading these this year. It's The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross and Interior Castle by St. Teresa of Avila. Have you heard of these books? Can I have people on camera, please? I want to see all your lovely faces. Nina says no. Mary, have you heard of these books? Before I talked about it? Kateri says yes. Coco, have you seen these books before? Have you heard of these books before? No.
Yeah, I've read The Interior Castle.
Summer, I gave it to you? Okay. These are both
No,
by
it was
Spanish authors. Spanish authors. Writing just before Cervantes. So when I researched it last night, I found out that he was very familiar with these 2 authors. And in fact, that Crystal Castle that we just found, if you read Interior Castles, which we will, guess what she refers to? A Crystal Castle. Guess what the Crystal Castle is? Her soul. And you know how he's talking about the middle of the night stuff? Things that happen at night with Don Quixote? They're from these books. He read these books. He's referring to these books. He's referring to the soul and the development of the soul. That's what this story is about. Because of these 2 saints that he was reading. That's pretty cool. So for religion, we're doing the Rule of St. Benedict, which we're finishing this week, and then we're doing the Blessed Sacrament, and then we move to the Dark Night of the Soul. I thought we'd do it for Lent.
Well, when will Lent start this year?
Lent starts, I don't know. Does anyone know when Lent starts? Lent starts. Yes.
Yes.
Lent this year, Wednesday, March 5th. And Thursday, April 17th. So I'm gonna go pick for you, Nina and Coco. Anyway, when we think that we don't understand what he's talking about, now at least we have some reference points. Reference points. Okay, I'll be right back. Let's see. Coco, are you in a position to read page 662, Don Quixote's meeting with the fair huntress?
sure. What page did you say?
662.
Oh yeah. Chapter 20, that's not 20. 30, Don Quixote's meeting with the fair huntress. Knight and Squire were sufficiently depressed and out of humor when they reached their animals, especially Sancho. Indeed, it grieved him to the soul to have touched their stock of money, for with every penny taken he seemed to be robbed of his very eyeballs. At length they mounted in silence and left the famous river. Don Quixote deep in thoughts of his love, and Sancho of his preferment, which at the time seemed to him very far from his grasp. For fool though he was well enough aware that all or most of the knight's actions were extravagant, and he was looking for an opportunity of escaping and going home without entering into any reckonings or farewells with his master. But fortune was kinder to him than he had feared. It fell out then that the next day at sunset, as they were emerging from a wood, Don Quixote cast his eyes about a green meadow and saw some people on the further side, whom he drew near. He recognized to be a hawking party. He rode closer and saw among them a gallant lady on a palfrey or milk-white hack, decked with green trappings and with a silver side saddle.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. What? Sancho's doing what? Is anyone concerned? He was looking for an opportunity of escaping and going home without entering into reckonings or farewells with his master. I thought he was sincerely sorry for having said he wanted to leave. Continue.
It fell out that the next day, I just said that. He rode close and saw among them a gallant lady in a palfrey or milk-white hack decked with green trappings and with a silver side saddle. The lady herself was in green, so bravely and richly attired that she looked the very soul of bravery. On her left wrist she bore a hawk, from which Don Quixote concluded that she was a great lady, and probably a mistress of all the hunters, as was the fact. And so he said to Sancho, "Run, Sancho, my son, and tell that lady with the hawk on the palfrey that I, the Knight of the Lions, salute her great beauty, and that if her magnificence gives me leave, I will go and kiss her hands, and serve her to the uttermost of my strength in all that her highness may command me. And mind, Sancho, how you speak. Take care not to mix any of your proverbs into your embassage." "What sort of mixer do you take me for?" answered Sancho, "to tell me that, as if this was the first time in my life I've taken message to high and mighty ladies." "Except for the one you took to the Lady Dulcinea," replied Don Quixote. "I do not know of any you have ever carried, at least in my service." "That's right," answered Sancho, "but a good paymaster doesn't worry about sureties, and in a well-stocked house the supper's soon cooked. I mean that there's no need to tell me anything to give me any sort of advice, for I'm ready for anything, and I can manage a bit of everything." "Indeed, I believe you," said Don Quixote. "Then go then, and God guide you." Sancho went off at a trot, urging Dapple out of his usual pace, and coming up to the fair huntress, dismounted and went down on his knees before her, saying, "Beautiful lady, that knight you see yonder, the Knight of the Lions by name, is my master, and I am one of his squires, called at home Sancho Panza. This same Knight of the Lions, who was known not long ago as the Knight of the Sad Countenance, sends me to ask for your highness's permission to come, with your approval, goodwill, and consent, and put his desire into effect, which is no other, as he says, and I confirm, than to serve your lofty haughtiness and beauty. In giving your permission, your ladyship will be doing something which will redound to your fame, and he will receive a most signal favour and happiness." "Indeed, good squire," answered the lady, "you have delivered your message with all the ceremony that such messages demand. Rise from the ground, for it is not right for this squire of so great a knight as he of the Sad Countenance, of whom we have already heard a great deal here, to remain on his knees. Rise, friend, and tell your master that he is most welcome to come and serve me and the Duke, my husband, in a country house of ours near here." Sancho got up, impressed alike by the great lady's beauty and by her good breeding and courtesy, but even more so by her saying that she had knowledge of his master, the Knight of the Sad Countenance, and if she did not call him the Knight of the Lions, it could only be owing to him having taken the name so recently. The Duchess, whose title is unknown, then asked him, "Tell me, brother squire, about this master of yours. Is he not one about whom a history has been printed called the ingenious gentleman Don Quixote de la Mancha? And has he not for the lady of his heart a certain Dulcinea del Toboso?" "That's the man, my lady," answered Sancho, "and his squire, Sancho Panza by name, who is, or should be in that history, is myself, unless I was changed in my cradle, I mean changed in the press." "All this is most delightful," said the Duchess. "Go, brother Panza, and tell your master that he's heartily welcomed on my estates, and that nothing would give me greater pleasure than his visit. Sancho returned to his master, overjoyed at this most agreeable answer, and repeated all that the fine lady had said to him, lauding her great beauty, her charm, and her courtesy to the skies in the country language. Don Quixote preened himself in his saddle, set his feet firmly in the stirrups, adjusted his visor, gave the spur to Rocinante, and advanced with a graceful bearing to kiss the Duchess's hands. And she, meanwhile, called the Duke her husband, and repeated the whole of Sancho's message to him while Don Quixote was on the way. The pair of them had read the first part of this history, and consequently knew of Don Quixote's extravagances. So they awaited him with the greatest delight, and were most anxious to make his acquaintance, their intention being to fall in with his whimsies, to agree with him in all he said, and to treat him like a knight-errant for so long as he would stay with them, observing towards him all the ceremonies usual in books of knights-errantry, which they had read and were very fond of. Now Don Quixote rode up with his visor raised, and made as if to dismount, whereat Sancho hurried to hold his stirrup, but the squire was so unlucky as to catch one foot on a cord of pack-saddle as he was dismounting from Dapple, and was unable to detangle himself, so that he remained dangling with his face and his chest on the ground. Don Quixote was not accustomed to dismounting without someone to hold his stirrup, and thinking that Sancho had already caught hold of it, threw his body off with a jerk, carrying Rocinante's saddle, which must have been badly girthed after him, so that he and the saddle fell to the ground together, to his no small discomfiture, and to the accompaniment of a volley of curses which he uttered between his teeth at the unfortunate Sancho, who still had his foot in the noose. The Duke ordered his huntsman to go to the assistance of the knight and the squire, and they raised Don Quixote, who was in an ill plight, from his fall, and went limping to kneel as best he could before the Duke and Duchess. But the Duke would on no account permit this. Instead, he dismounted from his horse and went to embrace Don Quixote, saying, "I am grieved, Sir Knight of the Count."
One second. Is this, am I right or wrong? If memory serves, this is the first time they've actually met royalty. Honest royalty. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're both tripping and falling. All right, that's kind of funny. There's a meaning in that. Continue.
I am grieved, Sir Knight of the Countenance, that the first step your worship has taken upon my land has been as unlucky as we have seen, but the carelessness of squires is often the cause of even worse accidents. The moment of my first meeting with you, valorous prince, answered Don Quixote, could not possibly be unlucky, even had my fall been to the center of the deep abyss, for even from there the glory of seeing you would have raised and rescued me. My squire, God's curse on him, is better at loosening his tongue to utter malice than at securing a saddle firmly. But wherever I may be, prostrate or upright, on foot or horse, I shall always be at the service of yourself and of my lady that Duchess, your worthy consort, and sovereign mistress of beauty and universal princess of courtesy. Gently, my dear Don Quixote de la Mancha, said the Duke, for where my lady Doña Dulcinea del Toboso is no other beauty should be praised. By this time, Sancho Panza was free from the noose, and being close at hand, anticipated his master's reply by saying, "It cannot be denied, in fact it must be declared, that my lady Dulcinea del Toboso is very beautiful, but the hair starts up when least you expect it, and I've heard say that what's called nature is like a potter who makes vessels of clay, and if a man makes one fine pot, he can also make 2, 3, or 100. This I say because my lady the Duchess is every bit as fine as the lady Dulcinea del Toboso, I swear." Don Quixote turned to the Duchess and said, "Your Highness can imagine that never in the world has knight-errant had a more garrulous or a droller squire than mine, and he will prove my words if your great sublimity will accept my service for a few days." To which the Duchess replied, "I am most heartily glad that Sancho is droll, for it is a sign that he is wise, since jokes and humour, Don Quixote, as you very well know, do not go with sluggish wits. So, as the good Sancho is droll and humorous, from now on I'll affirm he is wise." "And garrulous," added Don Quixote. "So much the better," said the Duke, "for much humour cannot be expressed in few words. But let us not waste our time in talk. Come, great knight of the sad countenance." "Of the lions, your Highness should say," interrupted Sancho, "for there is no sad countenance now." "Of the lions be it," continued the Duke. "Come, Sir Knight of the Lions, I say, to a castle of mine not far from here. There you will be entertained, and so exalted a personage should be, and as the Duchess and I are accustomed to entertain all knights errant who come here." While they were speaking, Sancho had adjusted and girthed Rocinante's saddle. So Don Quixote mounting on him, and the Duke on a fine horse, they put the Duchess between them and took the road for the castle. the Duchess commanding that Sancho should ride beside her, for she found infinite delight in listening to his wise sayings. Sancho did not require pressing, and working his way in among the three of them, made a fourth in the conversation, to the great pleasure of the Duke and Duchess, who counted it great good fortune to receive in their castle such a knight-errant and so itinerant a squire.
What the heck is happening? A castle? How far are we from home? Not that far?
Hmm.
A duke and a duchess who have read the history of Don Quixote know who Sancho is and are inviting them to a castle. What's going on?
Sancho is guiding his child.
Keep going, please, if you're willing.
Chapter 31, which treats of many great matters. Great was Sancho's delight at finding himself as he thought in the Duchess's favor, for he figured it out that he would find in her castle all that he had found on Don Diego's and Don Basilio's. For he was always fond of good living, and so seized any opportunity of regaling himself by the forelock whenever it occurred. Now our history recounts that on their way to the country house, or castle, the Duke rode ahead and gave his servants orders as to their behavior towards Don Quixote. For when he reached the gates of the castle with the Duchess, 2 lackeys or grooms promptly ran out, clothed down to their feet in what they call morning dress of finest crimson satin, and almost before he had heard or seen them caught Don Quixote in their arms, saying, "Go, your highness, and help my lady the Duchess to dismount." Don Quixote did so, and high compliments passed between the two on the subject. But at length the Duchess's insistence triumphed, and she refused to get down from her palfrey except into the Duke's arms, saying that she did not so consider herself worthy of laying so useless a burden on so great a knight. Oh. And the Duke came out to help her down, and as they entered a great courtyard, 2 beautiful maidens came up and threw a huge mantle of the finest scarlet over Don Quixote's shoulders. Then in an instant all the galleries of the court were crowded with the Duke and Duchess's men and women servants, crying loudly, "Welcome to the flower and cream of knights errant," and all, or most of them, sprinkled flasks of scented waters over Don Quixote and the ducal pair, all to the great astonishment of the knight, and this was the first time that he was positively certain of being a true and no imaginary knight-errant, since he found himself treated just as he had read these knights were treated in past ages. Sancho abandoned Dapple, and, tacking himself on to the Duchess, went into the castle. But his conscience pricking him at leaving the ass alone, he went up to a reverent waiting woman, who had come out with the others to receive the Duchess, and said in a low voice, "Mistress Gonzalez, or whatever your worship's name may be." "Doña Rodriguez de Grijalba is my name," answered the waiting woman. "What are your orders, brother?" To which Sancho replied, "I wish your worship would be so kind as to go out to the castle gate where you'll find a Dapple ass of mine. Please put him or have him put in the stable, for the poor beast is rather nervous, and can't endure being left alone on any account." "If the master has no better manners than his man," answered the waiting woman, "we've struck a fine bunch. Get away, fellow, and ill luck to you and the man who brought you here. Look after your own ass, for we waiting women in this house aren't accustomed to such offices." "But indeed," replied Sancho, "I've heard my master, and he is a douser for histories, tell the story of Lancelot. When he from Britain rode, ladies attended him, and waiting maids his steed. And as for my ass, I wouldn't change him for Sir Lancelot's horse." "Fellow, if you're a jester," said the waiting woman, "keep your jokes for those that like them, and will pay you for them. You'll get nothing but a fig from me." "Very well," answered Sancho, "so long as it's good ripe one. And if years count for anything, you won't lose the trick by a pip too little." "Son of a whore!" exclaimed the waiting woman, now incensed with rage. "Whether I'm old or not, my account is with God and not with you, you garlic-stuffed rogue." She said this so loudly that the Duchess heard her, and, turning round to find her waiting woman so excited and her eyes so furious, asked her with whom she was having words. "Here," answered she, "I'm having them with this good fellow, who asked me in all seriousness to go and stable an ass of his which is at the castle gates, raking up as example something about some place or other where ladies waited on a certain Lancelot and waiting women on his horse. And what's more, he ended up by calling me an old woman." "That I should consider an insult," replied the Duchess, "the greatest possible insult." Then taking Sancho aside, she said, "Take notice, Sancho, that Doña Rodriguez is quite a girl, and that she wears that headdress for authority and out of habit, not on account of her years. Bad luck follow me for the rest of my days, answered Sancho, if I meant any harm. I only spoke because I'm very fond of my ass, and I thought I couldn't entrust him to a kindlier person than the Lady Doña Rodriguez. Then Don Quixote, who had overheard all this, demanded, Is this fit talk, Sancho, for this place? Sir, answered Sancho, everyone must speak of their needs wherever he is. Here I was when I remembered my Dapple, and here I spoke of him. And if I had thought of him in the stable, I would have spoken of him there. On which the Duke remarked, Sancho is very right, and there's no reason to blame him. Dapple shall have as much fodder as he can eat. Sancho need not worry, for the ass shall be treated as well as he would be himself. After this conversation, pleasing to all but Don Quixote, they went upstairs and showed the knight into a hall hung with the richest cloth of gold and brocade. 6 maids took off his armor and acted as pages, all of them trained in their parts by the Duke and Duchess, and instructed in their behavior towards Don Quixote, for his hosts were anxious that he should really believe that they were treating him as a knight-errant. When the knight's armor was off, he was left in his tight-fitting breeches and his... What is that? Leather doublet. Withered, tall, and lank, with his jaws that kissed one another inside his mouth, he was a figure at which the maids would have burst out laughing if they had not been at pains to disguise their smiles, which was one of the special orders they had received from their master. They begged to be allowed to strip him so as to put a clean shirt on him, but he would not consent, saying that modesty was as necessary in a knight-errant as valor. He asked them, however, to give the shirt to Sancho, and shutting himself up with him in a room where there was a rich bed, he stripped and put it on. Then, finding himself thus alone with Sancho, he said to him, Tell me, you old clown, today promoted to jester, do you think it right to dishonor and insult that venerable and dignified waiting woman? This is the time to remember Dapple. Was this the time to remember Dapple? Are these the gentlemen to leave animals neglected, seeing how grandly they treat their owners? In God's name, Sancho, control yourself. Do not show the yarn you are woven of, or let them see what gross and peasant stuff you are. Reflect, you sinner, that the more honorable and well-bred the servant, the higher the master is esteemed, and that one of the greatest advantages of princes over other men is that they are waited on by servants as good as themselves. Do you not see, obstinate fellow, that you are, and unlucky man that I am, that if they discover that you are a coarse boor or a simple idiot, they will take me for a charlatan, or for some swindling knight? No, Sancho, my friend, avoid these pitfalls, for once you fall into being a babbler and a drawl, you have only to stumble, and you will descend to the state of a disgraced buffoon. Restrain your tongue, consider and ruminate upon your words before they leave your mouth, and observe that we have now come to a place which, by God's aid and the valor of my arm, we must leave with our fame and wealth increased to the uttermost. Sancho promised most earnestly to obey, and to sew up his mouth, or bite his tongue, before uttering a single unfitting or ill-considered word. He assured Don Quixote that he might rest easy on that score, for their identity should never transpire through him. Don Quixote then dressed himself, put on his shoulder strap with his sword, threw the scarlet mantle over his shoulders, put on a green satin hunting cap which the maids had given him, and thus adorned, walked out into the great hall, where he found the maidens lined up in 2 equal rows, and each of them holding some requisite for his ablutions, which she handed him with great courtesies and formalities. Next there came forward 12 pages with the butler to take him to the dinner, where the Duke and Duchess were already waiting for him. They put him between them, and led him with great pomp and majesty into another hall, in which a rich table was laid with only 4 covers. The Duke and Duchess came to the door of the hall to receive him, and with them one of those grave ecclesiastics who rule the houses of princes, of those who, not being born princes themselves, do not succeed in teaching those who are how to behave as such, who would have the greatness of the great measured by the narrowness of their own souls, who, wanting to show those they rule how to be frugal, make them miserly. Such a man, I mean, was this grave ecclesiastic who went out with the Duke and Duchess to receive Don Quixote. After exchanging innumerable courtly compliments, they concluded by taking Don Quixote between them, and going to take their seats at the table. The Duke invited our knight to take the head, and although he at first refused, his host pressed him so hard that he had to give in. The ecclesiastic sat opposite him, and the Duke and the Duchess on either side. Sancho watched all this ceremony, gaping with astonishment to see the honor these princes were paying his master, and when he saw the many compliments and entreaties which passed between the Duke and Don Quixote on the subject of his sitting at the head of the table, he said, If your worships will give me leave, I will tell you a story of an incident in my town concerning this business of seats. The moment Sancho opened his mouth, Don Quixote trembled in fear that his squire would certainly utter some absurdity. But Sancho read his anxiety from his face and said, "Have no fear, dear master, of my going astray or saying anything off the point, for I haven't forgotten the advice you gave me just now about speaking much or little, well or ill." "I remember nothing about it, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Say what you like, so long as you say it quickly." "Well, what I want to say," said Sancho, "is quite true, for my master Don Quixote here won't let me lie." "So far as I'm concerned, Sancho," answered Don Quixote, "lie as much as you like. I shall not stop you. But be careful what you say. I have so considered it and reconsidered it that I am as safe as the man in the tower who sounds the alarm, as you shall see by the tale." "It would be as well," said Don Quixote, "if your highnesses would order this fool to be turned out from here, or he will be uttering 1,000 idiocies." "But they must not take Sancho away, I declare, not by so much as an inch," exclaimed the Duchess. "I love him dearly, for I know he is very wise." "A wise life to your holiness," exclaimed Sancho, "for your good opinion of me, although I don't deserve it. Now this is my tale. There was a gentleman of my town who sent out an invitation. He was very rich and important, as he came out of the Alamos of Medina del Campo, and was married to Doña Mencia de Quinones, who was the daughter of Don Alonso de Marion, Knight of the Order of Santiago, who was drowned in the Herradura. It was about him that the quarrel was years ago in our town, and, as far as I can make out, my master Don Quixote took part in it. I mean, when young Thomas the Scamp, the son of Balbastro, the smith, got wounded. Isn't this all true, master? Say it is, for goodness sake. These gentlefolk may take me for a lying babbler. So far, said the ecclesiastic, I think a babbler, but no liar, though I do not know what I shall take you for later. "You call in so many witnesses, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "and cite so many proofs that I cannot help agreeing that you must be speaking the truth. Go on and cut your story short, for at the rate you are going you will not be done in 2 days." "He must not cut it short," said the Duchess, "to please me. No, he must tell it his own way, even if it takes him 6 days to finish, for even if it took so long, those would be the best days of my life." "Well, good sir," Sancho proceeded, "this same gentleman, whom I know as well as my own hands, for it is only a bow shot from my house to his, sent an invitation to a poor but honest farmer." "Go on, brother," said the ecclesiastic. "At this point, at the rate you are going, you will not be done with your tale till the next world." "I'll stop short of halfway there, please God," answered Sancho Panza. "Well, this same farmer arrived at the house of the gentleman who had invited him, God rest his soul, for he's dead now, and what's more, they say he died an angel's death, though I wasn't there, as I had to go to Temblec at the time, harvesting." "On your life, son," broke in the priest, "do not wait to bury the gentleman, but come back quickly from Temblec and finish your story, unless you have a mind for more funerals." "Well, the fact is," Sancho resumed, "that just as the pair of them were going to sit down to table, I seem to see them now better than ever." The Duke and Duchess greatly enjoyed the good priest's evident disgust at Sancho's prolixity and the frequent pauses in his story, but Don Quixote was consumed with anger and vexation. "Well then," said Sancho, "just as the two of them, as I have said, were going to sit down to the meal, the farmer insisted on the gentleman's taking the head of the table, and the gentleman likewise insisted on the farmer's taking it, for a man's wishes should be obeyed in his own house. But the farmer, who prided himself on his courtesy and good breeding, steadfastly refused, until the gentleman angrily put his hands on his shoulders and sat him down by force, saying, 'Sit down, blockhead, for wherever I sit shall be head of the table for you.' Now that's the story, and I really don't think I brought it out of place." Don Quixote flushed, and his brown face was veined with red, while the Duke and Duchess, perceiving Sancho's malice, concealed their smiles for fear that Don Quixote should end by losing his temper. Then, to change the subject and prevent Sancho from proceeding to further impertinencies, the Duchess asked Don Quixote what news he had of the lady Dulcinea, and whether he had sent her any presents of giants or malefactors recently, since he could not have failed to overcome plenty. To
Hold
which
on one
Don
second,
Quixote replied,
So, why were they perceiving Sancho's malice? What was the story?
well, they were saying that it doesn't matter if Don Quixote sat at the top or not, they were still going to see the Duke and Duchess as the head.
Thank you.
To which Don Quixote replied, "My lady, though my misfortunes have a beginning, they will never have an end. Giants I have conquered, and rogues and malefactors I have sent her. But where should they find her, seeing that she is enchanted and transformed into the ugliest peasant girl imaginable. I don't know, said Sancho. She seems the loveliest, beautiful creature in the world to me. I'm quite sure, at least, that no tumbler could give her odds for nimbleness or frisking. She can spring from the ground onto an ass as sprightly as a cat, I promise you, Lady Duchess. Have you seen her enchanted, Sancho? Asked the Duke. Have I seen her? Answered Sancho. Why, who the devil was it but I that first thought of this enchantment business? She's as much enchanted as my father. When the ecclesiastic heard speak of giants, rogues, and enchantments, he reckoned that this must be Don Quixote de la Mancha, whose history was the Duke's ordinary reading, for which he had often taken him to task, saying that it was folly to read such follies. And now that he was convinced that his suspicions were correct, he turned on the Duke in great anger. Your Excellency, sir will have to account to our lord for this good man's doing. This Don Quixote, or Don Fool, or whatever you call him, cannot be such an idiot, I imagine, as your Excellency would have him be, seeing the opportunities you put in the way of carrying on with his fooleries and nonsense. Then turning to address Don Quixote, he said, And you, simpleton, who's driven it into your brain that you are a knight-errant, and conquer giants, and capture malefactors. Get along with you, and take my advice, go back to your home, and bring up your children if you have any. Look after your estate, and stop wandering about the world, swallowing wind and making yourself a laughing-stock to all who know you, and even to those who do not. Where in the name of mischief have you ever learnt that knight-errants exist today, or ever did? Where would you find giants in Spain, or malefactors in La Mancha, or your enchanted Dulcineas, or all the pack of nonsense that figures in your story?
Uh-oh.
Don Quixote listened attentively to the venerable man's words, and when he saw that he had done, regardless of the Duke and Duchess, he got onto his feet with an angry expression and excitement in his face and said, but his reply deserves a chapter to itself.
Okay, I'm backing up just a minute. There's so many things that are confusing right now. First of all, we're on page 670 something. Yeah. So for all those pages, we've never run into any actual royalty. We've never run into anyone who somehow the ecclesiastic, who I think we mean a priest, but it could be the Protestant type, like a pastor type, I'm not sure. The priest, the ecclesiastic, is scolding the Duke for reading stories of knight-errants and saying that none of it's true and that he shouldn't be reading it. And I've been telling you that you shouldn't read it because there aren't giants and there aren't this and there aren't that and there aren't that. What am I thinking? Who does the Duke sound like?
Something.
Don Quixote in the beginning. And the priest in his town was saying, you can't read those things. In fact, we're going to burn those books. And now we're right back to the beginning.
I believe there will be a third party.
And the priest has just insulted Don Quixote. And Sancho was insulting Don Quixote. But the Duchess is praising Sancho as being wise and wonderful. And the Duke thinks that Don Quixote is, even though he's saying we have to treat him like he's telling all of his court, treat him like he's a knight, he actually wants to. He's not just doing it for a funny, right? Is he doing it for a funny? Or is he doing it because he's read these histories and he actually thinks that there's something about Don Quixote to admire? Is that what it is?
I'm like about
You think both?
he read the story of Don Quixote and the thing.
And he was entertained by it?
Yeah, and the thing Don Quixote did was kind of like mad and crazy. He kind of like just do it for fun. Who doesn't want to mess around with the
But I don't feel like he's exactly messing around. I know what you're saying, but is the Duke simply messing around with him, or is he recognizing in Don Quixote something that Don Quixote has recognized in all knights errant up to that time? which made Don Quixote want to do what he's been doing for 670 pages.
Well, I think like it's kind of like both. Like,
A little bit of both.
yeah, he not only admire him, but also kind of like laugh at
Let's see where this
him.
goes, yeah. And then what do we have to say about the ecclesiastic? What is Cervantes trying to say? If this whole time we've been saying, we've been surmising that Cervantes is using Don Quixote to say, in the old days, it was much easier to be a Christian and to believe the fantastical things that the faith offers because everybody did, because it was a normal thing that everybody looked up to those who were doing it to an exemplary degree, the knights. We looked up to them and we honored them, and they were all about justice and truth and valor and all that.
Yeah.
But now Cervantes is showing in Don Quixote that we don't have those guys anymore, except this lone guy who read the old stories and decides to set out and bring that back. And now we're to the point where a history's been written about the guy who wants to bring it back, and now we're to someone of note who's like, yeah, it seems crazy, but kind of like it. And the wife is saying, this Sancho guy, he's pretty great too.
Since we all agree with Don Quixote is reference Catholics, and
Yes.
in this case, I think that the Duke is more like people who are not believers. They just feel like it's kind of dumb for them to believe the fantastics, and
But they're interested enough. Okay, you've got a point. They're interested enough that, oh, let's read it, and then, oh, here he is. Let's.
yes,
Now, then the priest is like, no.
and the priest
Let's be practical.
kind of like is like anti-Catholic maybe, or even anti-religion.
I mean, I think Cervantes is saying something about the priests of the time who are not inspiring the people with the greatness of the faith, and instead of like, let's be practical here. Also, at the time of the Protestant Reformation, what are they saying? There's no miracles, there's no this, you don't need mass, you don't need sacraments. It's just you and God. It's very plain and straightforward. So there's really no such thing. So no honor there either. All right.
The priests during the Reformation, they bought and sold the intention, the indulgence.
That's not, yes, that's another issue that
So they don't care about people.
Bridget's bringing up, that what we know was part of the cause of the Reformation is that there were problems. And part of the problem was the priests who were more interested in money and practical things than in the faith, which is fantastical. All right, we'll see you at 11:10.